I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm an associate pastor and primarily dealing with children, students, stuff like that. Um, like you said, we've taught so much on collective, and one of the greatest disparities is the gap from graduation till mid 30s, late 30s, and stuff. How would this be implemented? I guess towards teens. Do you see it a good source of that, teaching them to do this so that when they're off in college, they're carrying this on?
Oh yeah, some of the best disciple makers I know globally are, you know, teenagers, early teens. Um, just amazing. They're stupid enough to do things that adults, just think, oh, that's beyond me or whatever. So yeah, I would really wholeheartedly encourage you to think about building that culture amongst the teens, and empowering them, to be able to plant the gospel in their school systems. That is a powerful tool, and if you're interested, Brett, I've got several guys that I know are in that vein, doing the trying to think like that. In fact, I've got a group that's just starting right now of guys who are beginning to get together to develop a playbook for student ministry for DMM,
Yeah, I'd
and what that
definitely
would.
be interested in that.
Okay. Well,
Awesome.
it's Roy.Moran at shoalcreek.org. It's in the back of the book there if you want to email me and let me know. And
Yes, sir. Awesome.
I think it's a great, when we work with people, and they say, we want to do this. And it's like, let's do an assessment of your church. Let's ask ourselves, where's the soil, the best soil to be able to begin to work with this? Because, you could think about this idea of multiplicative disciple making, and you could plant it alongside your church. So that's happened numerous times here in Kansas City. We have organizations, Mission Southside, organization that works with Hispanic immigrants in apartment complexes, and we help them gain a mindset for multiplicative disciple making and plant. So it's alongside, and there's 40 or 50 church partners out there, and in the county they're in, that cooperate with them. So all these churches have this DMM thing planted alongside, and it bleeds back into, because the volunteers come out of these churches to do the Mission Southside stuff. Um, but you could plant it inside, and if we're planting inside, I'm looking for something like, is there a Brett Johnson out there who's got a student ministry that's fertile, that these kids, there's a following, there's energy there, there's a desire to do something, there's a love for Jesus and the love to see that spread, and that's just a fertile ground for planting that. And then I'd ask the leadership team at the church to say, look, we're going to do this here, and they may be doing some things that make you nervous, but I'm going to ask you to build a barrier around them and support them and encourage them, and trust that we're going to be about kingdom growth and not church growth here. We want the gospel to move away from us, not toward us. And so let's support this and give it its best chance. So if it's inside, it's something like that, that I'm looking for to be able to do that with.
I guess my question, or oh, sorry, I'm
No,
talking.
that's good. Good. Good.
My bad. I guess my question would be, I'm just like fascinated by the picture in the story of jumping off the burning platform. And I guess kind of where I'm at is, I guess I'm still on the platform. I'm very at the very beginning of this jumping thing. Because I think the team that we have that's up here planning with us, we're all still very much in that. We were, before COVID and everything that's happened in Minneapolis this last year, we were set to do the whole attractional church plant, run of the mill, and I think it was by the grace of God that we were kind of stopped from doing that. But we're at this point where now we're having these discussions, and we're actually kind of starting our first discovery group in the next 2 weeks here, pretty soon. A guy from work is going to kind of help me in leading that. So really excited about that. But I guess my question is, I know a lot of people that are still very much on the platform, and not, nothing's wrong with this. So how much energy should we invest in trying to bring those people with us? And I know we've kind of already talked about that, but it's like, you know, I'm thinking, here in Minneapolis, there's a lot of old churches, a lot of old religion. It's like, hey, these things are going to die. And then we have a building, we can step in, and I'm trying to move my mind from that, but trying to actually get some of this thinking in those churches to see them kind of be a part of what we want, kind of this direction that we're moving as our little church plant. So how much energy is it worth in making that fight, or just scrapping it and going with the new process and letting those things hit rock bottom and then they come along? Or do we try to bridge the gap, I guess, and take them with us off the platform, sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, not a lot of energy, I would say. I want to be open to anybody that wants to talk, but if there's no holy discontent that exists there, I cannot make that happen. It's like, I don't know if there's something that you don't like to eat, but I don't like green beans. And I have had, being in church work for 40 years, I've had more than one, elderly lady, take the task to say, you haven't had my green beans yet, and no matter what they do, I do not like green beans. I've even had them with chocolate on them, and they, no, thank you. And so you just can't make people want, what you think they want. What I do, and what I have done in my own city, I have given away cases and cases of the book Miraculous Movement. That was the only resource I had, 12 years ago. It's a story about sub-Saharan Africa and what God is doing there. When Contagious Disciple Making by David Watson came along, I gave away copies of that, still do. And again, that's that filter. I look, is this a storybook person, or is this more of a textbook type person? They need a workbook, or do they need, the stories? I began building a YouTube channel for that very purpose, to collect YouTube videos that I could ship out to people and get them. I had people in, for instance, Jerry Trousdale. I had him in and raised money for 50 people to come to lunch to hear him speak. And then I collected names and made a pitch at the end for those of you who want get involved in a reading group. We're going to read Contagious Disciple, read the book, read Kingdom Unleashed, the second book that he wrote with Glenn Sunshine, or I just was constantly doing those kinds of things to create a pull, rather than push with people. It's dangerous to expend too much emotional energy trying to talk people into doing something that they haven't demonstrated that they want to do.
A lot of the way, when I first looked at that, I was reading it kind of like a methodological jump, but there's really a lot of theological undertones to that. And I think, to what you're saying, that's a lot more investment in some of those ways, maybe, than even, might not be spent as wise.
One of the problems is that as a people, people who follow Jesus aren't the greatest thinkers in the world, and so our theology and our methodology sometimes are so intertwined together that when you start trying to pick on the methodology, it looks like to them you're picking on the theology, and so you're challenging orthodoxy, and it's like no. No. God left heaven, came to earth, lived and died and rose again. Jesus died. He's the only, he's the only substitution that I can ever have to, to be a child of God. And, I got all that. I believe all that. I'm not talking about that. But when you start talking about, doing church in a different way, or not sharing the 4 spiritual laws, but inviting someone to read the Bible and discover what God has to say about life. And you no longer have a line of faith, you have a zone of faith. where people cross slowly and make, 15 or 20 or 30 small decisions that add up to a life that's beginning to follow Jesus. It's like, well, no. When did they pray that prayer? Or when did they walk forward? Or when did they do this? Or when did they do that? It's like, well, it may come, I always like to use this, it may come as a surprise to you, but Christianity didn't even know that until the 1700s in America. There never was an altar call. If Martin Luther were here, he would wonder what you were talking about, and we just don't, there's not a historical perspective in the average Christian like that. So I save those morsels for, timely bullets that I can, put in nice places.
Real quick, Roy, before we jump off here, it's 8:30. You mentioned a couple of books, Miraculous Movement, Contagious Disciple Making. You just referenced Kingdom Unleashed, which we're actually going to read here next. Is there anything else, if something we just were to, something on our own, or maybe a resource you're putting in other people's hands, kind of to Christian's point or to Steve's point earlier, just about challenging people? Anything else you'd add to that list?
Yeah, there's a few I think are really helpful. On the ecclesiology piece, there's a small little book called Micro Church, A Smaller Way. The author escapes me at the moment, but I'll come up with it. Sanders, Brian Sanders. The first half of that is a really nice, good defense of ecclesiology from a smaller perspective rather than the larger perspective. I don't endorse the whole book. I mean, he the Tampa Underground's where it's coming out of, and they kind of got this social justice thing that is there. But but the first part of it's really good. I think from the obedience based, thing, Scott McKnight's book, King Jesus Gospel, is really a good book. I just interviewed on my podcast Matthew Bates, who is a younger scholar who's come along now. He's got a book. He's got a couple of books, but this one's The Gospel Allegiance. And he really builds this idea that allegiance is bound in the call to follow Jesus, so it is really a good balance to say, because the moment the obedience thing comes out again, that methodological thing, a lot of people will say, well, you're just denying grace. You can't earn your way to God. So we're not saying you can earn your way to God. That's just not even on the table here. But what we are saying is that forgiveness is not the gospel that Jesus taught. Yeah. He said the kingdom is near. It was a kingdom gospel, not a soterian or salvation gospel. It's a kingdom gospel. And so, we've got it out of whack. So both of those guys do a really good job of putting that into perspective. So
good deal. Would you mind praying for us, Roy? Just as we,
I'd love it. Father, these men are engaged in the kingdom work. Intrinsically, there's nothing holy about them other than the fact that you are working, you've set them apart because of your work of the cross, and they are sons of the Most High. And so I just pray today, Father, that as they go about their work, whether this time was encouraging or discouraging, I pray that there might be this kind of up in the front of their mind, this sense that despite whether they succeed or fail, they are children of the Most High, and that today you look at them with favor. And Father, I pray that they could live at the edge of town where the Father and the Son met in Luke 15. They could live in that moment where a son full of life of failure, full of stupid mistakes, full of all kinds of things he wish he hadn't done, is stunned by the extravagant love of his Father. Father, I pray that would be what animates us, and what really fills our minds with who you are and what you want to do with the men and women that we're going to lay eyes on this week. Father, I just pray that you would give them clear minds, and you would make their kingdom efforts successful, that you would smooth the path in front of them and lead them to those persons of peace, those men and women who you've set apart to who want to figure out some things spiritually in their life. Father, I just pray that all of those efforts would be both multiplied and successful in seeing people connect with you. Thanks for their time, Father. I just appreciate the chance to be with them, and I know that that the things that they're about are such good things. And I just pray, Father, that you would make them successful at what they do. In Jesus' name, amen.